Hello everyone, at 1995 here in the video game fanfiction plot with a new story for you all. It is called Grey, and I do hope you enjoy this video. And remember, I do not own Transformers Prime series and Fullmetal Alchemist series or the story. I give full credit to its author MessyArtwok on DeviantArt. Now onto the story. Chapter 2, Complicated Devices. Scratching the blonde hair atop his head, Ed stared at the chalkboard, dumbfounded and utterly lost. Seeing the gibberish laying out for simplest terms made his head hurt. This wasn't alchemy. It was simply nothing more than blather he didn't understand. Sitting forward in his chair next to Mustang, Ed's eyes were draped and dreary. Doctor. Pausing in mid-sentence, the doctor pulled his pointing stick away from the chalk drawing of the device and smiled. Yes, my dear boy. Upon standing, the young alchemist stretched his arms with a loud obvious groan, then pulled himself forward toward the chalkboard. I don't pretend to know any of the nitty-gritty stuff you're talking about, so I'll get straight to the point. Are you saying that you and your team's hypothesis is that this ring is some sort of transportation device? Dr. Ramble smiled, giving but a single confirming nod. We believe that this is a device that has the capabilities of sending man anywhere on the planet in but the blink of an eye. We believe that the energy generated creates a space-time vortex made out of solid energy that allows a passing object to move almost instantaneously to any location of choice. However, only so much energy can be generated at a given time, so logically we can assume that the device had a limited range. Watching with his hands clasped in his lap, Al looked between Ed and the doctor. Who do you think created this device, doctor? Just then, there was a lapse of silence that fell across the room. No one said a word, but instead looked to Dr. Ramble. Waiting for him to speak. Taking a handkerchief from his pocket, wiping away the sweat from his brow, the doctor was at first slow to respond. Young Alphonse. To answer your question to my fullest capability, I have to speak truthfully when I say I really don't know who or even what made this device. But it is my guess that only a race of highly evolved, highly intelligent beings could make such a profound apparatus. Colonel Mustang, who had remained quiet for almost the entire length of the meeting, suddenly looked up with genuine interest. Though to be honest, the doctor now had the attention of everyone in the room who had heard him speak. Mustang stood, slowly, keeping eye contact with Dr. Ramble. Doctor, are you implying that something other than humankind is responsible for this thing beneath our feet? With but a simple nod, the doctor was sincere but firm. That is my belief, Colonel. I cannot say with absolute certainty that I am correct in my assumption. However, I do know for a fact that even with the abilities of young, talented alchemists like the Elric brothers, motioning to the two boys with the gesture of his arm, the doctor continued, trying to emphasize every word he said. There is no human power on this earth that has the abilities to create technology like this ring. This technology is beyond our understanding. Bringing his hand to his chin with curiosity as well as concern on his face, Colonel Mustang scowled. But if ancient human civilization isn't responsible for this thing, then who or what is? As the atmosphere and implications in the room grew thicker and heavier to comprehend, Al leaned over to Ed, whispering, You don't think that the chimeras have anything to do with this thing, do you? Laughing almost mockingly in a soft tone, Ed shook his head. No way, this thing is way too complicated, too advanced for them to have cooked up. Al was quiet for a moment before a sudden thought struck him like a hammer to the back of the head. Ed. Do you think that maybe Ollie? Just then red warning lights placed throughout the building started to flash violently as a warning siren echoed through the halls and corridors of the complex. Covering his ears, Ed bellowed. What the hell is going on? Just then, a male voice echoed over the intercom system. Attention! Attention! Code red. Perimeter breach. Repeat. Perimeter breach. All units report to designated zones. This is not a drill. Repeat. This is not a drill. Practically busting in through the door, a young scientist huffed and whined out of breath, covered in dirt and scratches. Doctor. Dr. Ramble, come quick. There's someone in the main hangar. He's trying to destroy the device. Bolting for the door, Dr. Ramble's face went to hysteria. What? How did they get past security? The young scientist sank against the frame of the door out of breath, barely able to speak. Picking the boy up, the doctor bellowed his question again. The young man shook his head. I don't know. Practically jumping over Dr. Ramble, Ed raced down the hallway. Come on, Al. We have to stop this guy before he destroys the device. Gently moving past the doctor, Al put a gentle hand on his back. Don't worry, doctor. The device will remain intact as long as we have anything to say about it. With that, Al raced down the hallway in hot pursuit of Ed, who was already prying over the locked doors to the elevator shaft using alchemy. Realizing that wasn't going to take them anywhere quickly, with a growl, Ed clasped his hands together, then slammed the floor using alchemy to create a stairwell going down. Blowing the wall with an alchemy circle, both Ed and Al raced into the large enclosure containing the ring, only to be met by a dark, mysterious figure watching the ring. His movements in all truth were slow, and uncoordinated. He sat upon the cold dirt on his knees, swaying side to side like the pendulum of a clock. Looking at the man, Edward slowly approached. You got a lot of nerve, pal, coming to a place where you don't belong. Who are you and what do you want? Cranking his head around in a very unnatural manner, a man of demented nature stared at the brothers, his eyes cold and lifeless, a smile literally sewn to his face. As he stood, his movements resembled that of a puppet being led around by the strings that confined him to being an obedient slave. Even more shocking, the man wore the same attire of that the guards patrolling the building would wear, though his clothing was tattered and singed. He watched the two boys swaying back and forth, letting his head rock side to side almost methodically, the whole time humming a familiar nursery rhyme. The sight was both sickening and disturbing. Clenching his fist harder, Edward spat at the strange figure, enraged by the fact that he did not answer to the demands. I will not ask you again. Who are you and how did you get in here? Letting his head fall backward, twitching ever so slightly, the man's cold, unnatural eyes stared at the two boys, smiling his forced smile. His words raspy and cracked with every forced breath. This is not meant for our world. The power. The might. The knowledge. Too great. Too powerful. It must be stopped. Must be stopped. They cannot. They cannot come through. Cannot. Come through. Twitching his head violently to the side, his eyes wide and wandering, the man tried to frown, but couldn't. Danger awaits beyond the gate. Let it not come through. Don't let it through. Don't let it through. Hanging his head, the man stared at the floor, repeating himself over and over again. Approaching very slowly, Al talked calmly, gently. Please, sir, you're not supposed to be here. It's not safe for you here. The man's gaze shot up quickly, his sick gaze studying Al. It's not safe, you say? Chuckling, the man's chest shook, then he threw back his head in roaring psychotic laughter. It's not safe anywhere. As long as this thing exists. There is no safe place. No safe place. No safe place. The man's eyes then turned ferocious as they rested dead set on Ed and Al. You want this thing to stay? Then you two must be deleted. In a sudden burst, the man shot forward, sprinting full bore into Al. Putting his hands together, the man summoned alchemy and created stone spikes from the ground intended to impale both brother. Dodging the attack, Al landed and noticed the blood dripping from the palms of the man's hands and his nails. The man continued with a barrage of blade-shaped rocks summoned from the stone, making up the walls and floor. Flipping backwards to avoid an armor-piercing rock, Al slid backwards across the dirt, standing beside Ed. Grinding his teeth in vexation, Ed growled. How the hell is this guy able to use alchemy without a transmutation circle? Without even looking at Ed, Al lowered his gaze. He has a transmutation circle. He etched one onto each of his palms using his own nails. I saw the blood dripping from his hands and nails. Looking at Al and then back at the man, Al cringed. What is wrong with this guy? Al shook his head, not taking his eyes off the man now beginning to circle them. I don't know. But brother, we need to end this quickly, before anyone gets hurt. Ed nodded. I agree. So you take him high and I'll take him low? Clasping their hands in a solid agreement, Al nodded. Let's show him what we can do. Just then, at once, the two burst into action, both splitting to opposite sides of the cavern. Sliding to a stop, Ed transmutated a spear out of the stone wall closest to him, hurtling the weapon at the man. The man then in question deflected with a stone wall, but in doing so could not predict that he'd be blindsided by a punch into the lower back by Al. The man stumbled backward for but a few steps before turning to lunge at Alphonse. In quick response, Ed created yet another spear and threw it, piercing the man dead center in the chest. There was a short moment where the man simply stood there, dealing back from the shock of cold stone mutilating his flesh. But instead of dying, he simply stared at the protruding instrument. Looking between Edward and Alphonse, then back at the weapon, the man grinned and chuckled. You cannot kill what can't die. Can't die. Grabbing the weapon by the head of the blade, the man pulled the spear straight out through his chest, then turned it over in his hand, examining it. Pretty. Just then, out of nowhere, a massive wall of flame engulfed the man in a raging inferno, forcing both Ed and Al to step back towards the ring. When the flame subsided, a charred figure still stood. Its hand lifted toward the boys and tried to approach, then another wall of flame came, then another, and another, until there was nothing left but a pile of smoldering ash. You know, instead of running off with absolutely no strategy or idea of what lay in wait, you two would have been better off waiting for instruction. Looking past the burnt pile of human flesh, Ed scowled, knowing all too well who that voice and alchemy expertise belonged to. Come on, Mustang. We had the situation under control. We didn't need any instruction. Rolling his eyes, Mustang chuckled. Of course not. You two are going to defeat him by simply staring at him. Growling, Ed shot back, his voice raised. We were just analyzing the situation, unlike you. You just came in here and charred him to a crisp with no questions asked. How do you know some enemy force didn't send him, or some? Brother, please. Putting his hands on Ed's shoulders, Al tried to detain him the best he could. That man was obviously a danger to everyone in the building complex. I don't think it can be argued that Colonel Mustang made the right choice. Huffing, Ed dislodged from his brother's grip. Yeah, okay, whatever. Coming down the elevator shaft, bursting out with concern written on his face, Dr. Ramble breathed a sigh of relief. Oh, thank goodness, the ring is still in one piece. I was afraid that it may have been damaged in all the commotion. Shrugging with a wide smile and chuckled, Ed strolled over to the ring, taking in its massive size. No worries, Doc, your precious device is still in one piece. Just as Ed said these words, he rested his hand on the cool dark metal surface of the ring, tracing one of its large creases with a finger. As he did this, there was a sudden shift in the room, and a low rumble reverberated through the ground itself. Stepping back from the ring, Ed stared up in frightened awe. Rocks close to the ring tumbled away as slowly, the device was coming alive. Brilliant flashes of blue and green light flashed from the outside of the ring and were drawn inward. Staring, the doctor's eyes lit up in awe-inspired delight. It's doing it again. It's activating again. Looking at Ed, Al yelled over the rising noise the ring was making. Ed! What did you do? Shaking his head, Ed called out over the sound. I didn't do anything. I just touched the damn thing, that's all. Again there was a large shift in the device. The energy being emitted drew towards the center of the ring, as the whole apparatus sounded as though it was building up energy. Grabbing an instrument from his lab coat pocket, Dr. Ramble held it out. He grinned in sheer delight. The activation has lasted almost 10 times as long as the last time, and the energy output is off the scale. This is incredible. Suddenly there was a loud repercussion that blew through the room, sending a wave of air through the cavern. Shortly after, the energy apparatus began to turn counterclockwise, pulling air into its event horizon. Realizing what was happening, Mustang turned to Ramble. Doctor, this is getting out of hand. Shut it down now. Looking at Mustang, Ramble's face turned from that of delight to that of concern. Colonel, even if I wanted to shut it down, I wouldn't know how. Just then a barrel of fuel flew past them and was sucked directly into the event horizon. Ed and Al, being the closest, could suddenly feel a force pulling them in, and it showed with Ed's coat and Al's feathery fixture on his helmet. Just then a strong gust pulled and Ed tumbled over, the air current strong. Al grabbed his hand and used alchemy to create a stone post anchored in the ground. Everyone else in the room was by now being evacuated from the facility and were being moved above ground to safety. Helping the scientists who had earlier been injured by the stranger now gone, Mustang called out to the boys but could not be heard over the roaring hum of the ring's energy. Holding tightly to Ed, Al called out, but he too had a hard time being heard over the device. Ed looked up at Al only to see his hand was slipping from its anchor. Calling Al's name was the last thing Ed would remember before feeling the sensation of flying up through the cool energy vortex with nothing but darkness to follow. Well, that's the ending of that chapter. I do hope you enjoy this video. If you like to see more, remember to hit that like button, subscribe to this channel and leave a comment down below. Until next time.